All right, now we're back, and first off we're going to be making gawumki, and that's these here. Most people know them as stuffed cabbage rolls, but in my family they were always called gawumki. And so first you need a head of cabbage, and you can't use it raw. You have to steam the leaves first. You just drop them in a pot of boiling water, and for about 8 minutes until the leaves are soft. Then you can remove it and make sure it's drained, and then start peeling off the leaves. And you have to make sure that usually there's this hard part on the leaves, and you have to cut that off first before you make them. And to do that, you just slice off the hard part. And there's really not much to that. And so you make, probably about 20 of these for one recipe. And so once you have your leaves, then you can start making the filling. The filling is a lot similar to meatloaf and meatballs, but it's kind of a combination of the two. So you need about 1.5 pounds of ground beef, pork, and veal. You can just buy it as meatloaf mix. And so about 1.5 pounds, put that in there, and then about 1/2 cup of rice. And about 1/4 of a chopped onion. You just use regular yellow onions. And if you want to, this is optional, you can put a little bit of salt in, and pepper if you like. And to give it a different flavor, you can also use basil. Then you just mix this all up with your hands. It's the most unpleasant part of making these. You have to be sure and make sure they're mixed all the way through so you don't have some chunks with rice and some without. Okay, and once you have this, you'll take off just a chunk about bigger than a golf ball but smaller than a tennis ball. And so make a nice big ball with that, and then you roll it up in the cabbage. Okay, you just put it in the leaf and roll it up a little, fold the sides in, and keep rolling. And so there's one, and as the leaves get smaller, as you get into the smaller part of the cabbage, you just make smaller balls. And so it doesn't really matter what size they are, as long as you roll them up and fold in the sides to make sure they don't fall apart when they're cooking. And to put them in the pot, first you need about, all right, we've got 2 different tomatoes. You have tomato sauce and stewed tomatoes. It's easiest just to buy these canned, and so about 1 16-ounce can of stewed tomatoes, and that's the first thing we put. You put the whole thing in the bottom of the pot. And then you'll put your gawumkis, just lay them, and you have to make sure you have them with the open edge down, otherwise they'll completely fall apart. So we'll just make one more. Just roll it up, fold in the sides. And it doesn't matter how many you have stacked on top of each other, so they won't dry out because you put in the tomato sauce. You don't need very much, just a few tablespoons. So a small 8-ounce can will probably do you for the whole recipe. So you leave this here, and you want to cover them and simmer them for about 45 minutes until the cabbage is nice and soft. And that's about it for the gawumkis. Here's what you'll end up with. And our next thing we're making are the pierogis, which are these. They're similar to dumplings, but they're different. And the most important part about these is the little edge, like on the edge of a pie crust. And I'll tell you why that's important later as we get into this. And first you need to make the dough. You just about 4 cups of flour, and just put in some butter and a little bit of salt and water if the dough is too dry, and then just basically mix that all up. And there's not really anything to it, kind of like making a pie crust. And you need to get a little ball of it, and you have to roll these out. So first we're going to flour the surface here. And this looks like it's going to be a little too big. So you roll this out because you want a nice flat circle to be able to put the filling in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to get it as close to a circle as possible. The dough shouldn't be too sticky, so you won't really have any problems with it sticking to the pin or the board or anything. And now for the filling. Okay, we're just going to be making a cheese filling. There's lots of different ways you can make the fillings for the pierogis. Some people make potato, and some do cheese, some do sauerkraut, some do meat. There's even prune and blueberry and all kinds of things. But we're just going to make a basic cheese one. You need dry cottage cheese. Not every store has it, but most major places do if you have to look around for it. And you just open up the container, and there's usually water on top, so you have to drain off the liquid, and then you add sugar to it. Some people, if they don't want it to be sweet, they'll make savory ones instead with pepper, but I prefer these sweet. So you mix that up, and you'll also want to put a little bit of butter in here. So you don't need very much, about a tablespoon or so. Okay, this isn't very well mixed, but it's good enough. Now, the assembly of the pierogi is the most important part. So, to make sure these are still flat. And scoop, you don't need very much filling at all, just a small amount. That's about all you'll need, because you have to fold these edges over. And even that's too much filling. So we fold these edges over and seal it up like this. With cheese, it's all right if a little bit gets into the edge you seal, but if you use something like potatoes, you have to make sure that none of it gets into the seal, otherwise they'll fall apart when they're cooking. Remember to take a very small amount of filling, and you want to pull it up over the edge. Seal these up. Now, if you order these in a restaurant, they'll probably just come like this, but that's because they haven't done them the right way, which is with these little edges. And to do the edge, it takes years of practice and a lot of skill to do this. Some people never figure it out, but you just take the edge and pinch it as if you're making a pie crust. It looks like it's pretty easy, but some people never quite get the hang of it. And so that's what it's basically supposed to look like. And that's important because when you're serving them, you want these covered in butter. They taste wonderful when they've got a lot of butter on and it gets caught in the little edges, and that's the best part about it. But to cook these, you'll take all of them, and you need a pot of boiling water. And you'll drop these into boiling water, and they have to cook there. And once they start boiling again, because when you put them in, the water will cool down. But once the water starts boiling, you need to time them, and it'll probably be about 10 to 12 minutes before they're ready. But you drop them into the water, and once they start floating, that means they're done. And yes, and for the other fillings, like, we're not going to make any of them, but for the potato, it would just be basically like mashed potatoes. You just get potatoes and boil them and mash them down and put in a little bit of butter and salt, and then you could use that as a filling, or meat, or basically whatever you want. It'll all pretty much work out. And another thing that you can do, if you're going for the whole ethnic meal, is serve kawatches. They're another traditional Bohemian food. Little dough. We won't make these. We might make them on a later show, but it's just like dough with filling on them. These are raspberry. There's apricots, cheese, all kinds of different ones, and they're served with powdered sugar. And so, once you have all these together, you'll have a good meal. All right, and that's all we have today on our first episode of Mmm Good Eatin. We've made gawumki, the stuffed cabbage rolls, and pierogi, and also the kawatche, and these can all be served together for a wonderful Polish meal. And so that's all we have for you today, and stay tuned next time for more Mmm Good Eatin.